Hi everyone, my name is James Feeney. Welcome to or back to my channel. The background is a little bit different today. It's cloudy outside, so I have turned the camera so that way I'm directly facing the window, hopefully getting better light. I've noticed that when it's cloudy and I'm sitting over with my altar and bookshelves behind me that things can get a little bit grainy just because the lighting isn't that great. So here we are. Hopefully this is better. It's a nice little test area to try this out. But I have been engaging in a lot of protection magic today. The sort of, I would say, maintenance, routine, ritualized protection magic that I know many participate in or do themselves at home. And so I thought it would be nice to come on and just have a chat about protection magic, get into a bit of what it is that I do in that fashion, and also why I think it's so important. Hopefully there are some inspiring tidbits that I can offer in terms of my own. Likewise, I hope in the comments that some of you can offer some of your own tips and tricks and personal practices involving protection magic, because I'm always finding inspiration from others and I invite that sort of conversation. So first I want to get into the importance of protection magic, just because I think that when a lot of people get into magic, or at least even when we're within it, there is this sort of draw to magic that is manifesting, creating things, seeking things out, having things come into fruition. There's this sort of excitement that is easy to, I would say, become consumed in or overwhelmed by, that involves the magic of creation and manifestation that is very active and potent, and what you see, I guess, in a lot of, I would say, mainstream media pertaining to magic and witchcraft. And while I sometimes fall victim to that myself, where I am really engaging in magic that's about drawing things in or creating things in my life or inciting change, there's a need for protection magic, and I think sometimes I lose sight of that. I think that I don't see as much on protection magic as I do on other types of magic out there, and so that's why I'm choosing to speak about this. I think that it's a pretty integral part and a baseline. I think it's something that I wish, I guess I should say, in the beginning, that I had a firm understanding of before I even went about conducting other types of magic, and I think that that is helpful and should be potentially the case for anybody seeking to engage in a magical path or a practice of their own. Protection magic is just it's a fundamental. So there are an infinite amount of ways to go about conducting protection magic. I would say it tends to be one area that requires maintenance. So whereas we have some spells that are about manifesting or drawing things in, that maybe we conduct once or it's over a series of nights, but that it's finite and then we wait for the fruition. Protection magic, I have found personally and seen in a lot of other practices, that it's something that you need to return to. So say you're protecting yourself, you're protecting your home, you're protecting your energy, your mental space, a human being, or using an item of some sort. Whatever it is that you are using to protect, or whatever it is that you are protecting, is going to require maintenance if you want long-term stable protection. So that's not necessarily always the case, but that's a commonality that I see in protection magic, and it's also something that I think differentiates it from other facets of magic that are kind of one-off spells that take place, that are finite in their conduct, and then we go about our way and wait for the fruition of whatever it was that magic entailed. So, for example, you may use the full moon to sort of reinvigorate whatever workings you've had going. I know personally that I will have protection sachets and bottles and bits of jewelry that I've enchanted or charmed that have an element of protection to them, that I will take on the full moon and I will sort of renew and have some maintenance on that protection spell to make sure that it's just as potent going forward, that it can continue to do its job and contain those magical properties that I have originally imbued it with. So that's one big thing. I have, for example, a sachet on my front door of my house that I, every full moon, will sort of re-imbue with magic to maintain its potency. I have little spell bottles that I will sometimes take with me places that are variants of various protection spells, whether that be protection and health or protection and a few caveats, and I will reinvigorate those on the full moon. Likewise, I do the same with crystals that I find to be extra protective. So an example, this would be a spell bottle that I have. It has a sigil in there. It has an oil blend that I created along with a few herbs that are more actually inside the piece of paper that the sigil is on, and I will every full moon imbue this, sort of charge it up, if that makes sense. So spell bottles are a great way to have protection. I think sigils are a really great method. I would say if protection magic involves a sigil personally, and this is my personal preference, whereas when I'm trying to manifest something or create something, I may destroy the sigil or burn it or something like that to make sure that it is sent out to be returned in some way. With protection magic, I don't ever feel the desire to, say, burn a sigil or to dispose of it. I have the desire to actually do what it is that I'm trying to have happen, where, see, this sigil's in here, I'm protecting the sigil, I'm maintaining the sigil, because I want it to protect and maintain me in some way, shape, or form. I may even, sometimes I'll have sigils on pieces of paper that I put in my shoe under it wouldn't be quite the sole, it's underneath that, not an orthotic either, you know what I'm talking about, but in the shoe, in the under part of the shoe, you can kind of wedge things in sometimes, especially when shoes get older. But when I do sigil magic that is protective in nature, I like to maintain and hold on to the sigil, but I don't like it to be visible. I don't want to have to look at the symbol. For me, that's something that I don't do in protection magic when I'm using sigils. I want it to be that the sigil itself, that art is hidden, but the actual physical thing is maintained or protected and sustained. So that's one personal tip. That's something that I do. I'm sure that there are others who go about sigil magic that is protective in very different ways. I also, for example, I will never open this bottle. As long as I want it to do what it is that it's doing, it's corked. I've pushed the cork down as hard as I can, and even when I'm reinvigorating the bottle or adding some potency to it, I never open it. To me, and I know that people who have spell bottles and spell sachets will, a lot of the time, and most of the time of things that I've seen, you keep them closed. As long as you want whatever it is that they're doing to persist, you don't open the bottle or the little baggie. So another one are these spell charm bags or sachets that you can create. When I do this, I will usually have some amalgamation of herbs and maybe a few drops of an oil blend. Sometimes I'll put small crystals and sigils or a little incantation or writing of some sort, and then I will tie them up, tie it pretty tight, and I won't open it. And I will keep it closed as long as I want that specific thing to persist and to continue doing the job that it's doing, and that is just part of how it goes. Likewise, as far as maintenance goes, I think that cleansing and protection are pretty inextricable. You want to cleanse before you protect, or the act of cleansing is somewhat protective to a degree. Protection is somewhat cleansing. A lot of those practices kind of intermingle, I find. So for me, incense are a big one, just for as far as clearing a space and keeping it protected and fresh and potent. So I really enjoy sandalwood. There are some incense that I find feel more protective than others. Sandalwood for me is the most protective. I'm sure that this is going to be different for everybody. It might vary based on tradition. This is not necessarily for me tied to any specific tradition, but I do know that correspondences of sandalwood are highly protective. So for me, that's a big one. Just either taking something that's burning, creating smoke, in some capacity in order to protect a space to fill it with that smoke. Likewise, I mentioned that I'll charge crystals on the full moon, and that's a way of maintaining protection. Big crystals for me in terms of protection are smoky quartz, black tourmaline. Why am I blanking on these now? There are a ton, and some have, of course, there's overlapping correspondences, which gives them nuance, which means the protection is not going to be the same from one to the other. This is going to be different for each individual person as well, and the the personal correspondences that we attach to any given magical item, tool, mineral, plant. But for me, smoky quartz is a big one. It feels like it protects through absorption, at least that's my opinion, that it absorbs negative entities or energy, and it will transmute that energy into something more positive. This is a rather large point. It's probably my most used piece of smoky quartz. I'm often holding on to it. I'll take baths with it. I'll do spells with it. There are a multitude of ways for me to go about using this. For me, protection is really about layering. So in protection magic, the idea of layering for me is big and important. It really just means that I'm going to have multiple things, multiple, I would say, workings, spells, and aspects of protection going on that really overlap. And so I'll have, say, that protection sachet on my front door of my house to overall kind of add protection to my home, but I'll also still keep a protection spell bottle with me. This is something I can also just toss in a bag, but I'll keep it in my room. I will have my smoky quartz near my bedside. I will have maybe amethyst as more of a sleep protective. So having multiple things going on is, in my opinion, the best way to ensure that the protection fulfills what it is that you're hoping for, which is to be safe, to be well. And I think that the idea of protection is kind of ambiguous and vague as well. What does protection entail? You would hope it would mean your safety and your well-being, but really it can vary, and it can mean a lot of things. So are you looking for physical protection to keep your body safe and well and intact and out of harm's way? Are you looking to keep your energy in that state? Is it your mental is it a mental sort of protection? Are you looking to keep distractions and outside forces that might cloud your judgment or your mind or your thought processes and inhibit your focus? Are you looking to protect your mind from those sorts of things? Are you looking to protect a specific task that you're doing? Say you're engaged in a really vigorous and complex work project and you want protection centered around that. You don't want outside interference, you don't want anything to go wrong, you want it to be seen through to its end fulfillment. And so something you might engage in is protection that is assigned specifically to that task, which is where I would say we get at those more finite spells. So a lot of protection that involves, say, the person, the energy, the home, the place are the types of protection spells that we're going to maintain, that we're going to recharge every now and then so that they can keep their potency. But if we are, say, conducting protection magic on something that's very finite and specific, the working is going to then be finite and specific. So just like that work project, you're going to maybe conduct that protection spell. It's going to last for the duration of that project, maybe a month, and then the project is done, so there's no longer need to protect it, and thus we are not going to recharge or reinvigorate that protection spell on that project. So that would be a scenario where I think that finite protection spells are useful. I think that in general, finite spells are useful for finite goals. So if my goal is to get a job and I conduct a spell for that, the job, I get the job, it manifests, say a month and a half later, I'm not going to need to follow up on that spell at all. I'm not going to need to really consider it unless it, one, doesn't work, or two, if I don't get a job, I'm going to maybe consider why that spell didn't work, what I did personally that meant that I didn't get the job, and then maybe reevaluate or add some more potency to that spell or redo it. So protection magic is in many cases an act of maintenance, because you're going to want protection, I think, throughout your life. I think most of us can agree that we want protection for ourselves and much of the things that comprise ourselves along with our spaces to be protected for the duration of our life. So that means maintenance in that regard. Likewise, I guess if you were to go about creating protection sigils, spell bottles, sachets, using crystals and their properties for these things, I guess I'll get at a few tips and tricks or ways that I go about doing this that I find helpful, or at least maybe the ingredients and the specifics. So for me personally, using natural materials is a must. I really don't like to have things like that are man-made and synthetic involved in spell work of any kind, especially protection. It doesn't feel right. So I try to avoid materials, tools, And I'm trying to think of what else. Yeah, materials and tools that are synthetic, so like plastics of any type. If I'm using anything that's metal, is it an alloy that's really man-made and not a naturally occurring metal? I think about these sorts of things that may sound odd, but I found that if it's on my radar that the tool or material is synthetic, it does inhibit the working for me to some extent. It's really, I think, more about your beliefs and your mindset, and for me that sort of creates some mental hangups, and so it doesn't work for me, but for you it may not bother you, in which case the working is not going to be inhibited or less potent. So that's one thing. Another is the way in which you may create a sigil. So that varies. There are so many traditions and ways to create and use sigils. There are some people who really like to use long-standing sigils that have historical context, that are well-known, tried and true. There are those who actually don't think that those hold as much power because they are so well-known and because they are so visible. There are those who like to say, make a sigil and not be able to see it. They don't want to have a reminder, and the reminder or the using it as a touchstone is something that detracts from the power. So there's so many nuances to sigil crafting, so I'm not going to get into that so much, but doing what feels right is most important, making sure that you feel confident wholeheartedly in whatever it is that you're doing. So if you have some reservations on, maybe you're reading a spell for inspiration or a pre-written spell that involves a sort of sigil that you don't feel as confident in, or the way that you go about it is a little bit different, change it up. I think that any spell that you're either taking from that's already been written, or a spell that you are taking inspiration from, is meant to be, I would say, a baseline for you to work from. Everything is about the biggest thing is your comfort, is your confidence, is your ability to feel like what you're doing is going to work. And so anything in a spell that doesn't feel that way is going to be a hindrance. So just getting those things out of the way. And as far as maintaining magical spells, you may not feel the need to every full moon add some potency or recharge them. It might be a once every season. It might be a once a year. It might be something that you really don't feel you ever need to recharge or add some potency to, and that's all right too. I guess what I'm getting at is really this is so personal and subjective that for me to offer really unique and finite tips would be limiting, and also probably wouldn't be helpful. So there's that. I'm trying to see if I had any more materials around that I wanted to use to get at certain topics, but I think that about covers it. This was really just a ramble, considering that I was engaging and recharging and going about some protection magic. So I just wanted to have that conversation. I think it's really crucial part of everybody's practice. I mean, you're doing it when you're, say, casting a circle to conduct other magic. You want to be protected before you engage in magic that's meant to manifest or draw something in or to create something. You want to be protected going into that. So protection magic is a really big fundamental. I think that it's the first thing and the biggest thing that any strong magical practice needs to some extent. You want to feel protected and safe, and you want to know that what you're doing is safe and that you are out of harm's way. You can conduct yourself as you will. So let me know how you go about protection magic, what it means to you, what role it plays in your practice, and what sort of specific workings you go for. Do you like sigils? Do you like spell bottles? Do you have certain ingredients that are really preferable to you in protection magic? I would be curious to know. So yeah, let me know. I hope you're all well. Subscribe and like this if this was interesting and fun for you. And until next time, bye everyone.